Welcome to this quick overview and demo of Commissions Conductor, the new sales commission module for the Acumatica framework by SymFinTech software. I'm Mark Lewis from SymFinTech software, where we build software so that you can conduct your business, and I'll be guiding you through this overview. Incentive Conductor is a fully configurable, automated commission management system embedded natively within the Acumatica framework. Commissions Conductor has a comprehensive and flexible rule management system that can handle even the most advanced, complex, and shall we say, idiosyncratic commission systems that are out there. In this overview and demo, I'm going to focus on the most common and obvious features, but I want you to know there are a lot of bells and whistles going on under the hood, and Commission Conductor can handle pretty much anything you can throw at it. So let's jump into its major features, and I'll show you what they look like in action. In this video, I'll introduce first the essential structure of Commission Conductor, the gears of the engine that serve as its beating heart, then how the various gears fit together and drive the system, including taking you inside the Acumatica module itself so you can see it in action. Then last, I'll offer a quick introduction to the inquiries and daily tracking systems available for sales management and for the persons who earn the commissions themselves. Let's start with this flow chart that goes through the various functions and how all the pieces fit together. If you look in the upper right, you see incentives, roles, and persons. These are the three fundamental objects or elements in the system. Everything is essentially built around these three objects. So let me go through these three things quickly and we'll clarify the basics. Then we'll see how all the gears come together and the machine really powers up. So first, incentives. Incentives define the on what it is that we're going to pay commission. What is it that we're going to measure? Right? What is it that we want to incentivize such that we can get people to do more of it? Now, let's look at the person, which answers the question, who gets paid? To whom are you going to pay a commission? Who are the people who are actually playing the part in making that sale or achieving that result? So, who is it that you want to incentivize to do more of something? The person answers the question, who are we going to pay based on what we measure? And third, we have the role. Each person plays a particular role in the process. And the question is, what is the role that they play? The role defines the various parts that a person plays relative to an incentive. So these are the three major conceptual objects in the Commission Conductor system. We have incentives, persons, and roles. Here's what it actually looks like inside of Acumatica. Under profiles, you've got incentives, roles, and persons. Let's take a quick look at incentives just to get a sense for what we can do here. Again, incentives define what we're going to measure to pay commissions. Here, we have just a number of incentives that we've created for various things. Notice, we can create incentives around anything, various inventory items or services. We can measure calls per month, customer satisfaction surveys, employee evaluations, pretty much anything you can record or import or API into Acumatica. So let's have a look at the incentive screen around food items. We have the incentive ID and incentive name, how often we compute the incentive. In this case, we compute it every month, but we only pay quarterly in this case. And whether or not it's a seasonal incentive, which means does the incentive change during Christmas or during the summer or something like that. Now, we can measure things that are internal to Acumatica from any of the modules, or data that's from external sources through API, or custom forms or web data, or whatever you can think of. Or we can do compound incentives, where we bundle a group of incentives together. Then we can create incentives that are active in production, or incentives that are just for calculations that modify how other incentives work, or incentives that are just for projections to test what-if scenarios. Down in the tabs, we can define where we want to draw the data from and whether the earnings are based on revenue or margin or quantity. And if you calculate the incentive when the invoice is booked, or when it's paid by percent, or when it's completely paid, etc. And then there's a whole series of filters so that we can measure exactly what we want to measure, whether it's inventory groups or customers or sale order properties or territories, etc. So that's incentives. Now let's go to persons. Again, the person defines to whom we're going to pay the commission. And this screen is relatively straightforward. Here's a list of persons in our instance. They might be salespersons in the Acumatica system, or they might be non-salesperson employees, or they can actually be vendors or partners or independent contractors outside the system. So just to get a sense for what this looks like, let's look at Steve Church. It has his person ID and a place for his salesperson ID or employee ID or both. And we can look at the incentives on which he earns commissions, or the roles that he is. He's a salesperson, or the customers that he has and his position history. This person management screen is where we can manage the person. Which brings us to roles. Again, roles are the part that the person plays in the process. Could be a salesperson role, or a sales manager, or regional manager, or customer service rep and customer service manager, or tech support rep, tech support manager, etc. Let's look at the salesperson's role. Again, it's relatively straightforward. We can view and edit the incentives that the salesperson role gets paid on, and who are the persons who've been assigned the salesperson role. Now, so we have incentives, we have persons, and we have role. All pretty straightforward. But here's where everything starts to come together. When we bring the role and the incentives together, we get our role incentive template screen, where we can define the commission rules on each incentive relative to the role that the person played. And we have the person incentive management screen, where we can customize the particular incentive structure for each individual according to our management and leadership objectives. Let's see how this works in Acumatica. Let's go to the Role Incentive Template screen. Here we can define the commissions and bonuses for the incentive at each level of the management hierarchy. Let's select the role of, let's say, salesperson, and let's select the incentive of food. When we select this combination, the screen populates with all the salespeople that are associated with the role we've chosen, in this case, salesperson. If we want to, we can make changes or manage these people from here, but let's get into the action part of this system and define the tiers for this role incentive combination of salesperson and food. Now, there are a lot of fancy things we can do with this tab, but let's just focus on the basics. Here, we've already defined the tiers on this incentive for the salesperson role. It says up to $75,000 in sales, the salesperson earns 1% commission. From $75,000 to $120,000 in sales, they earn 2% commission. From $120,000 to $200,000, they get 3%. From $200,000 to $300,000, they get 4%. And over $300,000, they earn 5% commission and a $5,000 bonus. That's how this section works. We can set up multiple tiers, an infinite number really, and combinations of commissions and bonuses on each tier for this particular role relative to this incentive. Then we can do the same thing for any other role we want. Let's leave the incentive food the same, but define the tiers for the sales manager. Here, we see that the sales manager has completely different tiers than the salesperson, and different percentages and different bonuses. Similarly, we can go to the regional manager. Different tiers, different commissions, different bonuses. Or we can look at a different incentive for the regional manager, such as computer electronics. Again, different tiers, different commissions, different bonuses. And if we want to change any of the tiers, assuming you have the right permissions, it's as easy as clicking on the value and changing it. Let's go from 500,000, we can lower it to 450,000 and increase the percentage commission from 0.67% to 0.7%. And let's add a bonus of $1,000. Then just click save and you're done. And this is where the power and ease of this module comes into play. You can define virtually anything to be an incentive that you measure. You can set multi-tier commissions and bonuses for each incentive on multiple levels of the management hierarchy. And when you add in compound incentives and incentives that can modify other incentives, and aging and seasons and quotas and targets, oh my, this Incentive Conductor module can handle pretty much any commission system you have. Now, let's go beyond the role incentive to the person incentive management screen, where we can customize the incentives and bonuses for each individual person if we desire. But before we do, I want you to notice the values for this particular role incentive combination of salesperson and food. Because now, when we look at the person incentive management screen, we can select the incentive of food and then select a person who's assigned the role of salesperson. Let's choose Theo Valich. And now look at the tiers for this particular salesperson. You might first notice that the columns in this tiers tab on the person incentive screen look just like the tiers tab in the role incentive screen. That's because they're largely identical. You might also notice that all of the values on this screen for Theo Valich are the same as the values in the role incentive template for salesperson food combination. Similarly, if we go to another person incentive combination for a person who's assigned the role of salesperson, let's say Casheen Williams, they also have the same values. Or for Steve Church, the same values. In fact, all of the persons assigned the role of salesperson will have the same values because once we define the commission tiers in the role incentive template, we can push them to the person incentive management screen for each person who has that role. And that's the workflow. We define the commission tiers once in the role incentive template, then push them to all the persons with that role. Each person who has the role will earn the commissions according to the values you define in the role incentive template. And if you're satisfied with this, you don't really need to do anything further with the person incentive management screen. However, if you want to modify or customize the incentives for any individual person, the person incentive management screen is where you can do this. For example, let's say that for some reason you want to modify the commission structure for Steve Church, that you have the permissions to do so. Perhaps you want to give him a little extra incentive to sell food. He seems stuck at the $100,000 to $140,000 level, so we decide to lower this particular tier threshold from $200,000 to $180,000, and to raise his commission from 3 to 3.5%, and to give him a bonus of $1,000 if he can hit the $180,000 target. And once again, when we hit save, the system will now calculate his individual commission using these new values, even though they're different than the role incentive values inherited by all the other salespeople. And that's how easy it is to modify commissions for individual persons. Again, you can do the same thing for any person in relation to any incentive. Just select the person, select the incentive, change the values, and save. Okay, these are the essential features of the Commission Conductor system that allow it to adapt to most any company's commission system. You can define incentives on almost anything, set multi-tier commissions and bonuses for multiple levels of management, and modify each value by individual person. And although I didn't get into compound incentives or modifying incentives or quotas and targets and the other features, this should give you a good sense for what Commission Conductor can do. Now, the last thing I want to briefly introduce is the daily tracking system in inquiries. Our Calculate Commission screen allows you to calculate any variation of person incentive or all of them. We recommend that a company run a recurring nightly calculation of all commissions. This allows management to monitor progress on all the incentive metrics, including real-time tracking of performance against quotas and targets over time, as well as being able to visualize this data using Acumatica dashboards for motivation and planning. Most importantly, because these inquiries are fully auditable down to the line item, and they track all the changes in incentives per person over time, Commissions Conductor allows companies to be Sarbanes-Oxley compliant when it comes to commission tracking and auditing. Even better, because each person can examine their own data, they can track where their commissions are coming from and how they were calculated. And this allows management to save endless hours in tedious reporting and resolves a lot of commission disputes before they even happen. In future demo videos, I'll go over more subtle features, such as our approvals process or our custom import structure so that we can API in data or webhooks in and out, incentives that utilize aging or seasons or accumulation for things like royalties, compound incentives and modifying incentives, and various other features that provide the flexibility you need to replicate your commission structures inside Acumatica in this Commission Conductor program. And this is where I'm going to end this overview and demo of SymFinTech Software's Commission Conductor and Royalties Sales Commission module for Acumatica. Of course, this brief introduction can only scratch the surface of what Incentive Conductor can really do and how it works, but it gives you a sense for the power and flexibility of the system. If you have specific questions about how your particular commission structure fits into our system, I would be happy to answer them. Just drop me a line at mlewis@symfintech.com. That's MLEWIS at SymFinTech.com. Until then, I'm Mark Lewis of SymFinTech Software, where we build software to help you conduct your business.